Hello everyone, my name is Zach. Welcome back to my channel. I hope you're doing well today, and welcome to the Zach Tries to Read Halloween special. Today we're going to be doing the second installment of the Stephen King drinking game series. Yes, I'm actually making this a series and not a one-off. Yay! So if you're newer to my channel, you might not remember, but back in the summer, I did a rant review of Stephen King's The Regulators, which featured a drinking game that was inspired partially by a drinking game created by the nostalgia critic for the Stephen King miniseries and movie adaptations, and it was also partially inspired by Ali Corvier's My Drunk Library, which I love, and so I decided to kind of combine the two and do a Stephen King drinking game for books. And the book we're going to be talking about today is Cell, which was a 2006 novel from Stephen King. Also, I thought it'd be fun for this series to try to incorporate more than just Angry Orchard. I still only drink cider. Sorry I don't do shots. I don't want to die. So I just drink cider and do drinks. But the first one up today is McKinsey's Black Cherry Cider, which I've had before and it's very good. Now I have already downed an entire bottle of Angry Orchard just to loosen myself up a little bit, because I didn't want to start this video off completely sober. So I did do that. As far as Cell goes, it's not as involved of a plot as The Regulators, so I'm not going to have to give you as close a play-by-play, which, thank God, because that Regulators video was so long and was a bitch to edit. So I'm hoping this will be quite a bit shorter, but it'll still probably be pretty long, because I am going to go through the whole book and through all the drinks. I will say there's not as many drinks because of drinking game rules. This book actually wasn't too bad as far as sticking to Stephen King's kind of goofier stuff, but that being said, this book was so bad that talking about it, I'm still going to need a drink, so don't you worry yourself. I will still be drinking. For instance, right now. Ooh, yep, that's the stuff. But before we get started, I do need to give some quick content/trigger warnings, and that includes talk of suicide, the September 11th terrorist attacks, bigotry. It's Stephen King, so you would expect that. The flavor of bigotry this week is especially Islamophobia, so if you're bothered by that. Mention of possible sexual assault, we'll get to that. And talk of terrorism. If those bother you, sorry, you won't get to join in on me dumping on this book, but also do what's right for your mental health. Don't stick around for my bad jokes, just exit and know that you should not read Stephen King's Cell. Even if you're not bothered by those trigger warnings, you shouldn't read Stephen King's Cell. Just don't. Ever. Alright, so one thing I quickly want to mention before I actually get into this book, I own quite a few of these Stephen King pocketbook edition mass market paperbacks, and so I thought I knew what I was getting into, and it was 450 pages, which isn't terrible for a Stephen King book, but I opened it and discovered that the font of this book is a little bit smaller, and the spacing between lines is a little bit smaller than most of the Stephen King mass markets in these editions. Yay me! And going into this book, I knew roughly the premise, and it seemed to me like it was going to be kind of a goofy, more fun, maybe even campy Stephen King novel, and I thought maybe the reason people didn't like it was because it was too campy and they were expecting Stephen King to be serious. What a fool I was. This book is played 100% straight, and it's going to be a problem if you don't already know the premise. When I get to it, you're going to completely understand why I thought this book was going to be campy and jokey and maybe even a little bit of like black comedy. But no, it just played dead straight, much to its detriment. But with that being said, let's get in this book. Stop talking about stuff, Zach. Just go. So this book centers around Mr. Clay Riddle, or Rydell. I don't fucking know. By the way, there's going to be swearing, if you didn't know. I don't censor myself for these, because screw it. And he just got done selling the rights to a graphic novel and its sequel that he wrote. Which means we're already here for a drink, because that's right, our main character is in fact a writer. So, Mr. Clay Rydell, whose family lives in, guess what state? Maine! I know I'm like chugging this bottle. I want to, trust me. So he's in Boston, Massachusetts at the start of the story, and he decides to celebrate his victory. He buys a knickknack for his wife, and then he decides to get himself some ice cream at an ice cream truck called Mr. Softy. Oh dear Lord. He sees two ladies in front of him who are talking, and then one of them pulls out a cell phone. And of course, Clay Riddle is too cool for school, and he doesn't like them cell phones. He don't need no cell phone. That's just crap. By the way, this book is like the worst 2006 time capsule, like, ever. Like, I mentioned the Islamophobia, and we're gonna get to that. And unfortunately, that's like a little too accurate for mid-2000s America. But just the culture and everything in here is just really 2006. The lady pulls out a peppermint-colored phone, which I can only assume means like the phone has like a peppermint pattern, because peppermint is a striped thing. It's not a solid color. Either that or it's like one half's red and one half's white. The description doesn't make any sense. I really hated it. But her phone goes off and her ringtone is Axel F by Crazy Frog. Anyone here remember Crazy Frog? Me too. I wish I didn't. And the main character has this thought when he's thinking about it where he's like, you know, his son liked that song. What is it called? Axel F by that Crazy Frog guy. Like, does he realize Axel F's a cover? Like, it was part of Beverly Hills Cop. Like, I would expect him to know that. I don't know if he's just writing this character to not remember, but I'm a music guy and that annoyed me. So anyway, Clay's in line for ice cream with these ladies, and they get a cell phone call. And the cell phone call, she's like, what? I can't hear you. And then suddenly she just kind of loses her mind. And her friend, who hears like a little bit of the phone conversation, starts to lose her mind. The one friend that answered the phone call, bites her other friend. The other friend starts to go crazy. And then everyone else gets a phone call, and everyone just starts losing it. Anyone who answered a cell phone goes crazy, starts attacking and biting people. What's that you say? Zach, you cannot be telling me that Cell, a novel by Stephen King, is about a zombie virus caused by a cell phone call. That's exactly what I'm telling you. Oh boy. So yeah, that's what it's about. Can you see now why I thought this was going to be like a campy, fun ride? Oh no, don't even think that, because it's not happening. So everyone starts freaking out, and this being in the mid-2000s, I thought he was trying to capture the kind of insanity and chaos that you see in the 2004 remake of Dawn of the Dead. And it's a very well done opening scene. It sets the tone, and it kind of shows, you know, chaos just erupting and like really sets the tone for kind of a gory thrill ride. And I thought he was trying to capture that with this opening sequence, but no. So the main character, while this is going on, looks over and he remarks, smoke from over on Newberry, observed Mr. Softy Guy. Still not emerging from the relative safety of his ice cream wagon. Something blew up over there. I mean big time. Maybe it's terrorists. So in a book whose premise is a cell phone call causes people to turn into zombies, you're going to draw 9/11 comparisons? Yeah, this book's got a bit of a tone problem, bouncing back and forth between some of the more goofy elements and playing it really straight. It's really kind of bizarre, and I just really don't like it. And that comparison gets even worse when Clay is trying to survive the attack. He ends up meeting this guy named Tom on the street who's also not affected. He also doesn't have a cell phone on him. And they look over and see the airport burning and mention again, you know, did they do it again? And then a plane flies dangerously low over the lake they're near and crashes into a building. That's when I realized I was not going to have the fun, campy time that I thought I was and that I was hoping for. Oh no, I was in for something a lot worse. And since we're talking about 9/11, let's talk about some Islamophobia and bigotry, shall we? Now, some doofus, some crazy jackwagon made the claim in a YouTube video that Stephen King only has his antagonists and villains say and do bigoted things. I mean, that's just like counter argument right here, along with like, you know, Thinner and some other books. Who was that guy? It was me. Yes, that's right. In the very next Stephen King book I read, after I say Stephen King only has bigotry come from his antagonists, This happens. They mention that the airport has smoke coming from it. The main character thinks, all he really seemed to have in his mind was some sort of half-baked joke. Did you hear the one about the, insert your favorite ethnic group here, terrorists who decided to bring America to its knees by blowing up the airport? So, there's some racism for you. And it's a choose-your-own racism adventure to boot. I'm never saying anything nice about Stephen King again. So as I said, he meets up with a character named Tom, and they start talking it over, and then they talk to a cop, and the cop, like, seems to know that it's the cell phones that caused everything, despite the fact they only saw, like, one person get a cell phone call and then go crazy. Like, it couldn't be, like, an airborne virus or just, you know, something else. It had to be just the cell phone. And then the cop, like, knows that for a fact after Clay, like, thinks that's what's happening. The cop confirms it, and it's like, how do you know that? Did you read the manuscript too? So anyway, they start making their way back to Clay's hotel because they're going to start making their way up north to Tom's home and then to Clay's home to check on his separated wife and his son. And then they're going to just keep going north to basically the wilderness where there's no cell phone signal because they assume it's going to be safe there. And one woman reports, she said she believed the naked man might, she only said might, have been carrying the body of a nude child, but possibly it was a doll. That was a drink for sexual content, but I'm not making a joke out of that. That's just... Horror writers, leave rape and sexual assault alone, especially when it comes to children. Like, leave the children alone. I'm begging you, please.
I just want to clarify, books about rape and sexual assault definitely have their place, especially if the book is talking about a character's search for justice, or maybe even just a search for revenge, or the book is commenting on rape culture as a whole. That's one thing. I'm more railing against horror authors that just kind of throw rape and sexual assault in a book that's not about that, just because it's another way to add, like, tension or terror into a scene. That needs to stop.
So anyway, Clay and Tom, they make it to Clay's hotel where they meet a manager by the name of Mr. Ricciardi, and they also see a girl on the street, and they end up saving her a little later on by letting her in the hotel, and her name's Alice, and so Clay, Tom, Alice, and Mr. Ricciardi, or whatever, start to make plans about heading north. Clay, Tom, and Alice sneak over to the cafe of the hotel, and they pack up some sandwiches for the road, and they come back and find that Mr. Ricciardi has hung himself. So, Clay, Tom, and Alice hit the road, and they start walking, and they have a nice conversation with a lady, and she's all, you know, oh, it's the apocalypse and bad things are happening, and she says, yes, we've all lost someone because this is the time of great tribulation. It's all here in Revelation, as she holds up a copy of the Bible. Oh yes, the ire of Stephen King is not just reserved for minorities, because if you're a Christian, Stephen King likes to remind you that there are some crappy people in your religious movement. Don't get me wrong, I'm Christian myself, and like, even these people are like my worst nightmare, because they tell me I'm going to hell just because I don't believe in a super conservative form of Christianity. I'm a very liberal form of Christianity that focuses on like the teachings of like acceptance and forgiveness and like being the best you can be and treating other people well. But like, almost every Stephen King book has this like crazy Christian, it's usually a crazy Christian lady, but sometimes I guess there's maybe a man somewhere. It's, the worst is The Mist, where she's like the whole villain basically. But it's not fun. Just give it a rest. Give lots of things a rest, King, but this one too. So anyway, they make it to Tom's house, and they kind of talk. Alice finds like some kid's shoe, and she ends up picking it up because she's like distraught, because like, you know, some little kid was affected, and this was his little shoe, and she ends up keeping it as like a good luck charm talisman. So they spend the night at Tom's house, and they realize the zombies aren't really attacking one another, and they're also flocking like birds, and they only really come out during the day, and then they kind of disappear at night. So they realize they need to travel at night, so they end up sleeping, and then they end up going next door to one of Tom's neighbors, who is a gun nut, and they get guns. But before they leave, they're having a conversation around the dining table. And this happens. For a moment, no one said anything. Clay was at a complete loss. He had a momentary picture of Alice subtracted from her dress in white bra and panties with her staring, hollowed out eyes, making her look like a paper doll. Hey, Clay, you want to get your mind out of the gutter? Jesus Christ. And that is it, folks. We have drained one. So I will be right back. I gotta get another one. Alright, guys, so this time we have a key lime apple ciders from Three Daughters Brewery. And this is actually located, I believe, in St. Petersburg, Florida, which is right outside of Tampa, where I go to school. And I have not tried this. Excuse me. It's okay. Doesn't really have much of a flavor, to be honest with you. The sweetness of the apple and the tartness of the key lime kind of cancel each other out, but it's alcohol, so it'll do. Let's get back into it. Where was I? And one more delightful little sexual comment we have before we move on, because, you know, it's not Stephen King if there's not bigotry, crazy religious people, and rampant misused sexuality. So they're watching the flock of zombies walk by, and he mentions, and then two men and a woman walking in a half-assed conga line, then a middle-aged woman who looked like a librarian, if you ignored one bare breast wagging in the wind, that was. Never has a breast sounded so unsexy as it does in a Stephen King novel. So they're talking, and they kind of realize that the zombies aren't really, like, knocking into each other on top of, like, you know, moving together without talking. And they mention how birds kind of have a telepathic communication thing. And so they start to say that the zombies are talking to each other with telepathy. So in the book, with 9/11 comparisons and suicides, we have a zombie virus caused by a cell phone where the zombies are telepathic. Why is this not campy, ridiculous, fun, King? Why is this taken so seriously? Oh, I hate myself. I hate myself for reading this. I hate myself for filming this. Not a fun time. So as they're walking north, they come across this boy who says, hey, I'm held up in my old boarding school with my school's headmaster. We're safe. And they say that the zombies are all going to the stadium at night, and they're playing like a compilation of like easy listening big band music. I had a rule last time where I had to drink for every time there was a song referenced, but they referenced so many songs throughout this book that I had to nullify that rule for this episode because I have neither the money to afford that much booze nor the stomach to keep it down. So they go to the school and they realize that the school had gasoline reserves for the generators, and they're thinking, if all the zombies during the night end up going to the stadium and standing around listening to big band music, that was a string of words I never thought I'd make a sentence, then why don't we take the gasoline and blow them up? Which, sure, okay, that could work. Especially if you were playing this as a more campy fun novel, but whatever. But so they start to make this plan, and then they try to siphon off the gas, and it doesn't really work, so they kind of end up going back to the drawing board. But they're talking more about the zombies in this thing, and they reference how there's a bunch of boom boxes, like, around the stadium that's amplifying the music playing, but they're playing a compilation CD, and not all the boom boxes have the CD. So they're saying that the zombies are telepathically relaying the signal from the CD from the stadium speakers through them to these boomboxes to play the music while they stand around in the middle of the night in some form of weird sleeping. What is this book? And they also reference that even like some of the zombies, when they open their mouth, you can like hear it like coming out of their mouth. I am shocked to find out this book was written so late in King's bibliography, because if I didn't know any better, I would swear this had to be one of the books he wrote while he was on hard drugs. The fact that he was sober when he wrote this just astounds me. So anyway, they end up coming up with a new plan. They end up going to a nearby gas station, and there's this weird thing where these zombies end up making like paper move and the ash in an ashtray move, So not only are the zombies telepathic and radio signal relayers, but they also are telekinetic now. This book is a mess. But anyways, they steal the propane truck, they drive it in the stadium, and they blow it up. Kablamo! I forgot to mention, right before they actually do this, they talk about how the truck is a stick shift. He calls it standard shift, which I've never heard that before. I always heard stick shift, but whatever. And this happens. Can you drive a standard shift? I learned on a standard shift. Can you? Clay smiled patiently. I'm straight, Tom. Straight guys know how to drive standards without instruction. It's instinct with us. I don't know how to drive a stick shift. Did Stephen King just tell me I was gay? Wow, first J.K. Rowling and now Stephen King, you know. You can't live your life without an author informing you that you're gay before you even know you're gay. Like, I swear I've lived 21 years as a straight man, but apparently I've been gay this whole time. Also implying that straight white men have a skill on instinct that non-straight men don't is LGBT phobic, homophobic, whatever you want to say. So that's another drink. This book is dumb! So flashing forward after that, Clay has this weird dream where he's like on platforms in the middle of a stadium filled with all the zombies, and there's like a man in a Harvard jacket, and they're all like yelling insane, and it's like they're auctioning off cattle, he says, but like him and all his friends are like the cattle. And then he wakes up and he finds the man from his dream standing outside the academy, and it doesn't attack him, and it's like pointing to the road. And then he finds out that not only the zombies telepathic, but they can't talk to themselves, but they can telepathically make you talk for them. Tell me no drugs were involved in this. Tell me no drugs. I don't know if I believe that. And they call him the Raggedy Man, or they also call him Harvard, so I'm just going to call him Harvard. Harvard tells them to hit the road. They're not going to be touched by any of the flocks, and they keep telling them to move north. The head of the school says, I'm too old. I don't really want to go, but Jordan should go. And Jordan, this is the kid who's part of the like boys academy, says he doesn't want to go without the head. And there's this comment. He spoke as stoutly, Clay thought, as any Muslim teenager who ever strapped on a suicide belt stuffed with explosives. Because Lord knows, you know, only Muslims have explosives and suicide bombers. No other religion has ever had extremists. You know, no totalitarian warmongering regime ever kidnapped boys and brainwashed them and convinced them to do suicide bombings. Only Muslims, right? By the way, the whole thing was sarcastic, if you couldn't tell, okay? Yes. I don't care if it was a few years post 9/11. Islamophobia is not cool, guys. So anyway, the professor is resolute that Jordan's gonna go, and he can't go. So one night, he kills himself, making that the second suicide in this book that should be campy fun. And when I read it the first time, they mentioned that he has one remaining eye. So I figured he shot himself, right? No. Oh no. He apparently wrote the word insane in a bunch of different languages that he spoke, and then took that same pen he used and shoved it through his eye into his brain to kill himself. That's not scary, that's just gross. So anyway, they have a funeral service for the head, and Jordan is like, you promised you would say a prayer for him, so say a prayer. And he says, nevertheless, he looked at Tom, go ahead, you promise. Clay almost expected him to add, and make it good, senor, or I will put a bullet in you, like a homicidal bandito in a Sam Peckinpah Western. I don't care if it's a reference to a Western film. That's racist. That is a racist writing of a Mexican accent. So you bet your ass we're going to file that under racism. Also, there's a reference to the regulators, which is another drink reference to one of his own works. I didn't plan this out that way. It just kind of happened. I didn't even get to talk about this, but there's a religious fundamental character in that book. I had to cut it for time. But one of the leaflets they hand out says, 1,000,000 years in hell and not one drink of water. And that's, that same phrase is said in this book. So there you go. More fun extremist Christian propaganda for you, because, that's interesting. So they see another group while they're walking north, and they're like, hey, let's talk. And they're like, no, the zombies told us not to talk to you. You're untouchable. You're supposed to walk north. Okay. And also, the Raggedy Man shows them a sign that says, Cashwalk no foe. And they know Cashwalk is like a town up north in Maine that had no cell phone service. So they assume it means like Cashwalk no phones. But why the zombies would be telling them to go someplace where the zombies aren't, I don't know. But they end up pissing off these guys who are like driving cars, and they crash, and they end up upsetting them. So they end up coming back a few pages later and throwing a chunk of asphalt at Alice, and it ends up killing her. At this point, I didn't really care because I was so pissed off. So she's not a bad character. It's just you're so frustrated with the book by this point that like you don't find it in your heart to care about anything. I guess rest in peace, Alice. You won't be missed. I'm sorry. And then further down the road, they meet up with some people, and they're like, oh, you're the untouchable ones, right? And they're like, yeah, we also killed a bunch of a flock, and so we're like on their list too, and let's show you something. And the guy that killed Alice, the zombies took him and crucified him, and then put a sign around his neck that said, justice is served in Latin. So I guess they can't talk, but they speak Latin? So anyway, they get to Clay's hometown, and he finds there's a note from his son that says, I went to City Hall, and then they go to City Hall, and there's another note from his son that says, I saw Mom, she's one of the zombies, I'm going with the group, we're going to Cashwalk, which is the place where they wrote Cashwalk Nofo. I feel like I'm saying mofo, but it's no foe. Come get me. So he's like, okay, I'm going north. And the rest of the group is like, hey, if the zombies want us to go there, maybe it's a trap. Maybe we shouldn't. And Clay is like, no, I'm going to get my son. If y'all want to go, you can go. So they end up splitting off. The new group plus Tom and Jordan, they grab a car. They start to head west. Clay walks by himself. He ends up watching two zombies fight outside of a fire station, and they seem to be fighting over the fire truck because they're talking now. And it says, Mayuk, which he says he assumes is my truck. And their telepathy starts going crazy, knocking out power lines. And so he's a little confused because the zombies weren't fighting, but now they're fighting and they're talking, and he's like, what's happening? And he walks a little further and gets reunited with the group he just split from. It's literally 15 pages from group split to group reunion. Oh wow, I was really on the edge of my seat. I was really missing those characters. I mean, can you imagine if I had to go a whole 25 pages without hearing from these people? Like, I don't know if I could have done it. Fuck my life. So then they're saying, like, they're forcing us to go to Cashwalk. So, right before they get there, they end up getting a bus, and the roads are cleared, and there's a bunch of zombies, like, walking to the place where they're going to Cashwalk. They end up stopping right before they get to Cashwalk, and one of the new members of the group pulls Clay aside, says, here's a cell phone, you'll know when the time is right, you need to call this number that he wrote on a sticky note, and then he shoots himself. So there's 3 suicides in this book, which I thought would be a campy fun ride, which was just jarring to me, and like, I know people would kill themselves in the zombie apocalypse if it ever happened, but like, I like zombie stories because they're usually like more fun, you know, or it's a look at like kind of how desperate and like self-serving we get when everything goes to hell. But I was not expecting a book full of suicides, and it's just... So anyway, they finally get to Cashwalk, and the Raggedy Man's there, and he herds them into like this building, and they end up locking the door. But before they go in, Clay finds his zombie wife, and this happens. We had to have one more sexual moment in this book. It was the blouse he recognized first, the high-necked white silk blouse that he had always called Sharon's doctor shirt. In some ways, he thought it was the sexiest garment she owned, partly because of that high prim neck. He liked her bare, but he liked to touch and squeeze her breasts through that high-necked white silk blouse even more. He liked to bring her nipples up until he could see them poking the cloth. Really? The thing that does it for you is a high-necked blouse? I mean, the loins want what the loins want, but like, you know, not something lacy or some skimpy lingerie or even like a corset, like a blouse that you can see her nipples poke through. Sure, whatever. I'm just glad this is almost over at this point, but oh. So they're being kept in this building, the doors are locked, and finally it clicks what the guy's given Clay the cell phone for, because he's like trying to figure out why, because the zombies can read minds, so he's like, why even bother giving me a cell phone if I'm not supposed to know what to do with it? And the zombies know I have it, so like, what's the point? Well, it turns out this guy, I believe his name is Richard, he's not relevant besides this, so like, what does it even matter? Richard, as they were driving, they passed a construction site. Richard thought to grab 2 cell phones, and they said maybe he remembered that, you know, quarries and blasting zones would have dynamite, so maybe he got dynamite and loaded the bus with it, and he killed himself so that the zombies couldn't read his mind and stop this plan, and maybe the other cell phone is in the bus as the trigger. How do you figure that out so fast? Like, did you read the manuscript too? So anyway, they sent Jordan, the kid, out. So he goes, he gets the bus they drove in on, drives it into the center of the mass of zombies, and then comes back, and he says, yeah, I turned the cell phone on, and it has bars, like, and it's supposed to be a dead zone. Remember dead zones? Well, 2006 was a time, wasn't it? Clay turns on the cell phone he has, and see, he has bars, and he figures out that the people that built this carnival they're at, I forgot to mention that, they're at like a little state fair carnival thing that's on like an Indian reservation so that they can have a casino. While they were building it, they put a generator cell phone tower at the top of like a thrill ride, the highest point in the carnival, so that they could have cell phone service while making the thing. Clay goes to call the number. He realizes he doesn't have the number in his jacket anymore. They search. He realizes it was in a pocket he didn't check. Wow, that was tense. He calls the number. The thing explodes. Kills another flock. I guess it kills the Raggedy Man because we never hear from him again. And despite the fact they already tried this once, I guess it was more permanent this time because they killed more of them. But remember the 2 that were fighting at the fire station and how they were doing things they weren't supposed to do? Well, Jordan the kid brings up that he thinks it's like a worm in the software where it's kind of changing and ruining things. It's always supposed to be like a bug or a virus. Why he decided to go with worm? But he's saying, oh, it's like there's a worm in the system, and, you know, when there's a worm or a virus in the system, you restore back to an earlier point before that bug or virus existed, and, you know, restore back to earlier programming. So they get the idea that maybe they can reboot all of the zombies back to where they were before they got the cell phone call, and that maybe that'll save them. Clay says, cool, great plan. I'm gonna find my son. Y'all go. So all the side characters, they go off into the sunset. I believe they say they're going north to a place that had no cell phone signal because, you know, that worked the first time. Clay finds a son. His son's a zombie, but he's not attacking him anymore. He spends some time with him, and then he gets a cell phone, and he calls 911 like most people would have been calling 911 when they got the virus, and he holds it to his son's ear in hopes that it will fix him, and the book cuts off at the very end before we know exactly what happens afterward. And that is Cell by Stephen King. God, this book sucks. Here I was. I thought I would have a fun, campy read. I'd be able to make a stress-free, not rage-inducing Stephen King drinking game for y'all for Halloween. I thought only his antagonist would say racist, hateful crap. I truly am Boo Boo the Fool. So, that's all for me today. I'm gonna drain the rest of this. I gotta go do homework now. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good Halloween. I hope this was at least somewhat entertaining. I'm sure it's long as shit again. But hopefully y'all enjoyed it, and I'm sure I'll see you next time in a couple months when I work up the nerve to do this again. But until then, practice safe drinking habits, drink responsibly, and only read good Stephen King books if you're going to read them at all. At this point, I don't even know why I'm reading them anymore. If you like this video, do the likes, If you want to subscribe, I'd thank you for that. And I'm going to die now. Bye.